You know, when you think of ancient Egypt, what comes to mind? Probably the Great Pyramids, the Sphinx, this massive, unchanging empire that feels like it lasted forever. But that's not really the whole story, not by a long shot. Today, we're diving into the real rhythm of Egypt, a dramatic pulse of rise, fall, and incredible rebirth that defined its age of empires, the Middle and New Kingdoms.
So, was ancient Egypt really this unstoppable force, an empire that just stood there for all time without a single crack in its foundation? Yeah, not even close. The real story is so much more exciting. It's this incredible rhythm of amazing highs followed by absolutely devastating lows, a constant, dramatic cycle of order, chaos, and then, somehow, a triumphant comeback.
And this timeline, right here, it lays out that exact rhythm. You can see these distinct periods of stability, the Middle and New Kingdoms, but they're literally sandwiched between these eras of total chaos. These aren't just dates on a line. This is the very pulse of a civilization.
All right, so let's jump into that first great comeback story, the rise of the Middle Kingdom, an era that was forged directly from the fires of chaos.
I mean, just look at the contrast here. It tells you everything. After the Old Kingdom falls apart, Egypt just plunges into 16 years of total anarchy. You've got warlords fighting for scraps of power, trade just stops, and people are starving. Then, out of all that chaos, this powerful pharaoh, Mentuhotep II, he rises up, crushes his rivals, and pulls the entire country back together again, kicking off the Middle Kingdom.
But this is Egypt's story, right? And that rhythm of rise and fall, it always comes back. The order and stability of the Middle Kingdom, well, it just didn't last. Internal weakness and power struggle started to creep in again, and that left the kingdom vulnerable.
Vulnerable to an outside threat. And that threat was a group called the Hyksos. They swept in from Southwest Asia around the mid-1700s BC, and they had this massive technological advantage. The Egyptians were used to fighting on foot, so they were just no match for horse-drawn chariots and better weapons. The Hyksos conquered Lower Egypt, and they ruled for 200 years. Can you imagine that? This incredibly proud civilization forced to pay taxes to foreign kings. You can bet the resentment was built.
And all that simmering resentment? Well, it absolutely fueled the next great rebirth. This brings us to the New Kingdom, Egypt's golden age. We're talking about a level of power, wealth, and glory that was just completely unprecedented.
So how'd they pull it off? It all starts with a leader from Thebes named Ahmose, who finally manages to drive the Hyksos out for good. But this victory creates this powerful new motivation, pure fear. The Egyptians are absolutely determined to never be invaded again. So what do? They decide to conquer and control all the possible invasion routes. And that defensive thinking, it pretty quickly turns into an offensive one, launching this incredible era of conquest that creates the Egyptian empire.
And the result of that strategy was just staggering. By the 1400s BC, Egypt had completely transformed. It was now, without a doubt, the dominant military power in the entire region, with this massive empire stretching all the way from the Euphrates River in the north, way down to Nubia in the south. But hey, empires aren't just built on swords and shields. The New Kingdom also saw some of the most remarkable rulers in all of history, including a woman who had to literally shatter every tradition to claim her power. This is Hatshepsut. In a society that basically said women don't rule, she took some pretty extraordinary measures to solidify her authority. We're talking dressing as a man, wearing the fake pharaoh's beard, even calling herself king. But here's the thing, her reign wasn't really defined by war. It was defined by wealth. She launched these huge trade expeditions, and the riches that poured back into Egypt funded some of the most magnificent temples and monuments the world had ever seen. But you know the pattern by now. Even this golden age couldn't last forever. The New Kingdom started facing new, powerful threats from outside, and it would take one last great pharaoh to make a final, desperate stand. I mean, this ancient poem kind of says it all. It's about Ramses II, who we know better as Ramses the Great. He came to power in the 1200s BC, and his reputation was forged in fire. He was a warrior king, the ultimate defender of Egypt.
And man, did he need to be a warrior. Egypt was under siege from all sides. He fought the mighty Hittite Empire to a complete standstill, which led to the world's first ever known peace treaty. He beat back invaders called the Tehanu from the west. And then he faced the mysterious and terrifying Sea Peoples, a naval force so powerful they had already crushed the Hittites. Ramses' entire reign was just one long, brutal fight to hold the empire together.
And this was the final, tragic chapter of the empire. See, Egypt did eventually defeat the Sea Peoples, but it was what we'd call a Pyrrhic victory. The cost of 50 years of nonstop war was just catastrophic. The empire survived on paper, but in reality, it was left broken, exhausted, and bankrupt. And very soon after, the new kingdom collapsed, and Egypt's age as a great imperial power was finally over.
Okay, so we've followed this dramatic story of pharaohs and empires, but what about the foundation of it all? What was life actually like for the millions of ordinary people whose work fueled these kingdoms through all the chaos and all the glory? Let's take a look at the society that made it all possible.
Egyptian society was basically a rigid pyramid with very little chance to move up. At the very top, you have the pharaoh, who is seen as a living god on earth. Right below were the powerful priests and nobles who ran the government and the temples. Then came a small but super important middle class of scribes and skilled workers. And at the very bottom, forming the massive base that supported everything else,
were the farmers and peasants. And this chart, wow, it really puts it into perspective. A whopping 85% of the population. Their labor in the fields and on those giant building projects is what made everything else possible. It's a really powerful reminder that this entire glorious civilization rested on the backs of ordinary people.
But you know, inside this super rigid structure, we find something surprisingly modern, actually. And that's the legal rights of women. Unlike almost anywhere else in the ancient world, Egyptian women could own property, they could enter into legal contracts, and they could even divorce their husbands. It's this fascinating detail that really challenges a lot of our assumptions about ancient societies.
So, as we've seen, the real story of Egypt isn't one of static monuments just frozen in time. It's a powerful narrative of constant movement, from chaos to order, from a small kingdom to a vast empire, and then, inevitably, back into decline.
And that leaves us with one final question to chew on. When we look back at this incredible, turbulent history, what is the true measure of a civilization's greatness? Is it the towering monuments they leave behind for us to marvel at? Or is it found in the resilience, the struggles, and the daily lives of the millions of people who actually built them?